A virgin is forced to marry old billionaire in exchange to clear her family's debt. What if I told you that the man everyone calls a heartless billionaire is actually the one who needs saving? What if the young woman forced into marriage becomes the very person who transforms not just her own destiny, but the soul of a man the world has written off as irredeemable? Dear Heavenly Father, we ask for your blessings upon everyone watching this video today. May this story touch hearts and remind us that even in our darkest moments, hope can emerge. Guide those who need direction and comfort those who are struggling. In your holy name we pray. Amen. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to our channel. Before we dive into today's incredibly moving story, let me know in the comments below where in the world you're watching from. If you want to see how this incredible journey unfolds, comment "Ride on Mr. J" right now, and let's dive into today's story. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button because we share stories that will change your perspective on life forever. 22-year-old Lily Chen stood in the rain outside the towering glass building that housed Hawthorne Industries, her hands trembling not from the cold October wind, but from the weight of the decision that would change her life forever. The manila envelope in her bag contained documents that would legally bind her to a man she had never met, a man 37 years her senior, a man whose name alone made grown businessmen tremble with fear or respect. But what the world didn't know about Richard Hawthorne was about to become Lily's greatest discovery. The story began 3 months earlier when Lily's father, David Chen, a hard-working restaurant owner in Chinatown, made the devastating phone call that shattered their family's peace. The medical bills for her mother's cancer treatment had spiraled beyond their means. The experimental therapy that could save her mother's life cost more money than they could earn in 10 lifetimes. With their restaurant already mortgaged to the hilt and every available option exhausted, David had made a decision that would haunt him forever. He had borrowed money from Richard Hawthorne's private investment firm, using forged documents that inflated their restaurant's value. When the truth came to light, the debt stood at $2.7 million, an astronomical sum that meant not just bankruptcy, but criminal charges that would destroy their family and end any hope of saving Lily's mother. Richard Hawthorne was known throughout the business world as the man who never showed mercy. Newspapers called him the Ice King of Wall Street. Stories circulated about families he had destroyed, businesses he had crushed without a second thought. When David received the summons to Richard's office, he prepared for the worst. But what happened in that meeting would surprise everyone. Richard sat behind his massive mahogany desk. David's file spread before him like evidence in a trial. At 61, Richard commanded respect through sheer presence. His steel-gray hair was perfectly styled, his Italian suit impeccable, but it was his eyes that made people uncomfortable. They were the color of winter storms, and they seemed to see through every lie, every weakness, every desperate hope. "Mr. Chen," Richard's voice was measured, controlled, "you have committed fraud against my company. The legal consequences would normally be severe." David's heart pounded so loudly, he was certain Richard could hear it. "Please, Mr. Hawthorne. My wife, she's dying. I would do anything to save her. I know what I did was wrong, but I was desperate." Richard studied him for a long moment, and something flickered in those storm-gray eyes, something that might have been understanding, or pain, or perhaps just curiosity. "Tell me about your daughter," Richard said suddenly. David blinked, confused. "Sir?" "Your daughter, Lily, 22 years old, graduated summa cum laude from Columbia with a degree in literature. Currently working 3 jobs to help pay for her mother's treatment. Tell me about her." The fact that Richard knew so much about his family should have terrified David, but instead it gave him the strangest sense that this man understood struggle in ways that contradicted everything the newspapers said about him. "She's everything good in this world," David said quietly. "Brilliant, kind, determined. She sacrifices everything for others without thinking twice." Richard leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "I'm going to make you an offer, Mr. Chen. I will forgive your debt entirely. More than that, I will personally ensure your wife receives the absolute best medical care available." regardless of cost. I will set up a trust fund that will secure your family's financial future for generations." David's breath caught. "What's the condition?" "Your daughter marries me." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. David felt the room spinning around him. "She's just a child compared to you. She has dreams, aspirations. I can't ask her to sacrifice her life." "You're not asking," Richard said simply. "I am. This is not a negotiation, Mr. Chen. This is the only alternative to criminal prosecution and your wife's death. Think carefully about what matters most." When David returned home that evening, he found Lily reading to her mother in the small bedroom they had converted into a makeshift medical room. Margaret Chen looked so fragile against the white pillows, but her eyes still sparkled when she saw her husband. "How did the meeting go?" Margaret asked. Though she had already read the answer in David's expression, David told them everything. When he finished, the room fell into a silence so complete that the only sound was Margaret's labored breathing. Lily was the first to speak. "When?" "Lily, no," David said immediately. "We'll find another way." "When?" she repeated, her voice stronger. "He wants the ceremony in 2 weeks." Margaret struggled to sit up. "Absolutely not. I won't let my daughter sacrifice her life for mine." But Lily had already made her decision. That night, as she sat by her mother's bedside watching her sleep, she thought about the kind of person she wanted to be. Her mother had taught her that love meant sacrifice, that sometimes the greatest act of courage was giving up what you wanted most for the people who needed you. She also found herself wondering about Richard Hawthorne. Why would a man who could have anyone choose to marry a stranger? What kind of loneliness drove someone to buy companionship rather than seek genuine connection? For all his wealth and power, there was something in his proposal that felt less like dominance and more like desperation. The wedding took place on a gray November morning in the study of Richard's Manhattan penthouse. The ceremony was witnessed only by Richard's longtime attorney and housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had worked for the Hawthorne family for over 30 years. Lily wore a simple white dress she had bought the day before. Richard wore the same type of dark suit he wore to every business meeting. As they exchanged vows that felt more like a business transaction, Lily caught something in Richard's eyes that the newspapers never captured. Behind the intimidating exterior, she saw a profound sadness that seemed to echo her own. After the brief ceremony, Richard handed her a set of keys. "The penthouse is now your home. You have your own wing, complete privacy. I don't expect anything from you beyond what we agreed upon." "What exactly did we agree upon?" Lily asked. "You keep my name. You attend necessary social functions as my wife. In return, your mother receives the best medical care available, and your family's financial security is guaranteed forever." "And what do you get from this arrangement?" Richard paused at the question, as if no one had ever asked him to examine his own motivations. "Convenience," he said finally, but the word sounded hollow, even to him. The first month of their arrangement was marked by careful politeness and strategic avoidance. Richard left for his office before dawn and returned after midnight. Lily spent her days reading in the massive library, exploring the art collection that filled every room, and talking to her mother on the phone for hours. Mrs. Rodriguez, a warm woman in her 60s with knowing eyes and a gentle manner, became Lily's unexpected ally. 30 years I've worked for that man," Mrs. Rodriguez told Lily one afternoon as they arranged fresh flowers in the dining room. "You want to know what I've learned? He's the loneliest person I've ever met." "He chose this life," Lily replied, though without much conviction. "Did he? You know his story, yes?" Lily shook her head. Despite being married to him, she knew virtually nothing about Richard's past beyond what had been printed in business magazines. Mrs. Rodriguez glanced around to make sure they were alone, then sat down beside Lily. His parents died in a car accident when he was 12. No other family. He was raised by nannies and boarding schools. At 18, he inherited everything, but he also inherited his father's enemies, people who wanted to destroy him simply because of his name. She paused, choosing her words carefully. He learned very young that everyone wanted something from him. His money, his power, his influence. He built walls so high that even he forgot what it felt like to let someone inside. "Why are you telling me this?" Lily asked. "Because you're the first person he's brought into this house who doesn't want anything from him. And I think that terrifies him more than any business deal ever could." That evening, for the first time since their wedding, Lily and Richard found themselves in the same room. He was in his study, working late as usual, when she knocked on the door. "Come in," he called without looking up from his computer. Lily entered carrying 2 cups of tea. "Mrs. Rodriguez thought you might like some Earl Grey. You missed dinner again." Richard finally looked up, surprise flickering across his features. "You don't need to concern yourself with my eating habits." "Maybe not," Lily said, setting 1 cup on his desk. "But I concern myself with people, and whether you like it or not, you're a person." Something in her tone made Richard actually pause his work. "Is there something you need? Is the living arrangement not satisfactory?" "The living arrangement is fine," Lily said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "I wanted to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly." Richard leaned back slightly, his guard immediately rising. "What? When was the last time someone did something kind for you without expecting anything in return?" The question hit Richard like a physical blow. He stared at her for a long moment, his mind racing through decades of interactions, business deals, social obligations, and transactional relationships. "I don't understand the relevance of that question," he said finally. "You can't think of a single time, can you?" Lily's voice was gentle, not accusatory. "When was the last time someone asked how you were feeling and actually cared about the answer?" Richard stood abruptly, walking to the window that overlooked Central Park. "Those are luxuries I can't afford." "They're not luxuries," Lily said quietly. "They're what make us human." Over the following weeks, something subtle began to shift in the dynamics of their unusual household. Lily continued bringing Richard tea while he worked late. She started leaving books she thought he might enjoy on his desk, with small notes explaining why she had chosen them. She asked Mrs. Rodriguez to prepare his favorite meals and made sure they were kept warm when he inevitably worked through dinner. Richard found himself looking forward to these small gestures in ways that confused and unsettled him. He had built his entire adult life around the principle that emotional attachment was weakness, that caring about someone gave them power to destroy you. But Lily's kindness came with no strings attached, no hidden agenda that he could identify. The breakthrough came on a Thursday evening in December. Richard came home to find Lily crying in the library, her phone clutched in her hand. "What's wrong?" The question escaped him before he could stop it. "My mother," Lily said through her tears. "The treatment isn't working as well as they hoped. The doctors want to try something more aggressive, but it means she'll be even sicker, and there's still no guarantee." Richard stood frozen for a moment, watching this young woman cry for her dying mother while trapped in a loveless marriage to save her. The unfairness of it struck him with unexpected force. Without a word, he disappeared into his study. 20 minutes later, he returned with his phone in his hand. "I've just spoken with Dr. Elizabeth Harrison at Johns Hopkins. She's one of the world's leading oncologists. Your mother will be transferred to their facility tomorrow morning, and Dr. Harrison will personally oversee her care." Lily looked up at him with wonder. "Why would you do that?" "Because you asked me to save her," Richard said simply. "I intend to keep my word." But it was what happened next that changed everything. As Richard turned to leave, Lily stood, and without thinking, reached out and took his hand. "Thank you," she whispered. Richard froze at the contact. When was the last time someone had touched him with genuine affection rather than calculation? When was the last time someone had looked at him and seen something worth thanking rather than something to fear or use? "Richard," Lily said softly, and hearing his name spoken with such warmth nearly undid him completely. That night, Richard couldn't work. He couldn't read. He couldn't do anything but think about the way Lily had said his name, the way her hand had felt in his, the way she had looked at him as if he was someone worthy of gratitude rather than suspicion. For the first time in decades, Richard Hawthorne allowed himself to hope that he might be capable of being more than the cold, calculating machine he had trained himself to become. The next few months brought a transformation that no one could have predicted. As Margaret Chen's health improved under Dr. Harrison's exceptional care, something beautiful began blooming between her daughter and the man everyone had written off as heartless. It started with conversations over dinner, which Richard began joining for the first time in years. Lily would tell him about the books she was reading, her thoughts on literature and philosophy, her dreams of maybe teaching someday. Richard found himself sharing stories from his travels, his observations about different cultures, his surprising knowledge of art and music. "You're not what I expected," Lily told him one evening as they walked through Central Park. "What did you expect?" "A monster," she said honestly. "Someone who could destroy families without feeling anything." Richard was quiet for a long time. Maybe I was that person. Maybe I had to be to survive. And now? Now I'm not sure who I'm supposed to be. The turning point came when Lily discovered Richard's secret. While looking for a book in his study, she accidentally triggered a hidden panel that revealed a room she had never seen. Inside, she found something that took her breath away. The room was filled with charitable foundation documents, medical research funding approvals, scholarship programs, and anonymous donation records. Richard Hawthorne, the man the world believed was motivated only by greed, had quietly given away over $1 billion to causes ranging from cancer research to education for underprivileged children. When Richard found her there an hour later, surrounded by the evidence of his hidden philanthropy, he looked like a man caught in his deepest secret. "Why do you hide this?" Lily asked, tears streaming down her face. "Because the moment people know you have a heart, they start trying to manipulate it," Richard said quietly. "I learned that lesson early and never forgot it. But doesn't it get lonely being seen as something you're not?" Richard looked at her standing among the scattered documents of his secret generosity, and for the first time in his adult life, he told someone the complete truth. "Every single day," he whispered. That night, everything changed. They talked until sunrise, sharing stories, fears, dreams, and the pain that had shaped them both. Richard told her about the car accident that killed his parents, about the relatives who fought over his inheritance while he grieved alone, about learning at 12 years old that everyone who claimed to love him actually loved his money. Lily told him about growing up as the daughter of immigrants, about the pressure to succeed, about watching her parents work themselves to exhaustion to give her opportunities they never had, about the guilt of receiving so much love while feeling powerless to protect the people who had given her everything. "I married you to save my mother," Lily said, as dawn broke over the city, "but I think I might be the one who's been saved." Richard reached across the space between them and took her hand, the gesture that had once felt so foreign now feeling like coming home. "Lily," he said, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "What if we stopped pretending this is just an arrangement? What if we chose to make this real?" The wedding that mattered happened 6 months later, not in a lawyer's office with contracts and conditions, but in Margaret Chen's hospital room, with her parents as witnesses and Mrs. Rodriguez crying happy tears as she photographed the moment Richard slipped a ring onto Lily's finger that he had designed himself, inscribed with words that only she would understand. "You taught me to hope again." But the real magic happened in the months that followed. Richard began teaching Lily about business, discovering that her intelligence and compassion made her an extraordinary partner. Together, they transformed Hawthorne Industries from a company focused solely on profit into an organization that balanced financial success with social responsibility. Lily convinced Richard to go public with his philanthropic efforts, and their foundation became one of the most effective charitable organizations in the world. Richard learned to smile again, to laugh, to see beauty in small moments. Lily discovered strength she never knew she possessed, becoming a force for change in industries that had never seen someone fight for justice with both passion and strategic brilliance. Margaret Chen's recovery became complete, and she often said that watching her daughter find love was better medicine than any treatment. David Chen expanded his restaurant into a chain with Richard's business guidance and Lily's creative vision, creating jobs for dozens of immigrant families. The most beautiful moment came 2 years after their first wedding, when Richard woke up before dawn to find Lily already awake, watching the sunrise from their bedroom window. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, pulling her close. "I was thinking about that girl who stood in the rain outside your building, so terrified of the man she was about to marry," Lily said softly. She thought she was sacrificing her future to save her family. And now? Now I know she was actually walking toward the greatest love story of her life. She just didn't know it yet. Richard kissed her forehead, still amazed every day that this extraordinary woman had chosen to see past his reputation to the man he could be. "I spent 40 years believing that love was weakness," he said. "You taught me that love is the only thing that makes any of this worthwhile." Their story became legend in business circles, but not for the reasons people expected. They were known not for hostile takeovers or ruthless deals, but for the companies they helped rather than crushed, for the families they supported, for proving that business could be both profitable and compassionate. But more than anything, they were known for looking at each other across boardrooms and charity galas with the kind of love that made cynics believe in fairy tales again. Years later, when young couples asked them for marriage advice, Lily would always say the same thing. "Don't marry someone because they're perfect. Marry someone because they make you want to become the best version of yourself and because you inspire the same transformation in them." Richard would add, "And remember that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the most impossible circumstances. Sometimes you have to trust that love will find a way, even when logic says it's impossible." Today, Richard and Lily Hawthorne run one of the most successful business empires in the world. But more importantly, they've created a legacy of proving that two broken people can heal each other, that love can transform the hardest hearts, and that sometimes what appears to be an ending is actually the most beautiful beginning imaginable. Margaret Chen, now cancer-free for 5 years, loves to tell people that her daughter didn't just save her life. She saved the life of a man who had forgotten how to live, and in doing so, she found her own purpose. The moral of their story isn't that money can solve everything or that arranged marriages lead to happiness. The moral is that every person, no matter how hardened by life, is capable of love and transformation when they meet someone who sees their worth beyond their reputation, their wealth, or their mistakes. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with passion, but with compassion. Sometimes the person you're meant to save is the person you thought was saving you. As we close this incredible story, I want you to remember that love often comes disguised as something else entirely. It might look like obligation, or duty, or even sacrifice. But when two people choose to see the best in each other, when they decide to build something beautiful together despite impossible odds, that's when miracles happen. Thank you for joining me on this journey today. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories of love, hope, and human transformation. Until next time, remember that your own love story might be just around the corner, waiting for you to be brave enough to believe in the impossible.